You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Break Podcast, where we deconstruct how top performers build resilient lives and break mental barriers to do work they love. I'm your host, Michael Gardon. What happens when you've reached the top, but you find it isn't everything that you thought it would be? How does being in the C-suite change the way you think about success, achievement, and happiness? My guest this week is Clint Murphy. Clint rose to the top to become CFO of a large real estate development company based in Vancouver, Canada. But I found Clint not in real estate circles or financial accounting circles, but rather we connected around personal growth, entrepreneurship, and yes, career breaking. The past few years, he's been building out his future path, which is on its way to transition from CFO to full-time creator, coach, and consultant, and private equity real estate investor. It's about teaching people how to get on top in one area, only to realize what their true passion and path is, and how to move from one to the other without burning boats or taking a ton of risk. After all, Clint is first and foremost a husband and father of two young boys, now aged 14 and 11. So what does this pivot look like? He started taking content creation seriously in August of 2020 and now has over 270,000 followers on Twitter and combined 300,000 followers across all his social media platforms. Clint is also the host of the Growth Guide podcast, which he started as a hobby in 2020 during the COVID pandemic. And now he's going to be celebrating his 100th episode this year. Most recently, he started the weekly Growth Guide newsletter in February and already has 7,000 avid readers. Clint is a lifelong learner and growth fanatic with a goal to help 1 billion people better, achieve more, and become financially free. He does this by sharing lessons from millionaire mentors, expert authors, and his own life. You can find Clint on Twitter. I am Clint Murphy, and find him online at thegrowth.guide. I hope you learn as much as I did from Clint's approach to late-stage career transformation.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you. Clint, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for spending a Sunday afternoon with me.
Thanks, Mike. Really looking forward to having this conversation. Some of my favorite topics are what we're going to dive into together.
Perfect. I'm super excited as well. And I must say, before we get started, since I got on Twitter and really kind of diving into the community, I've met so many amazing Canadians that are creating, between yourself and you are in Vancouver, right? Which is which is a fantastic city I visited. Dan Go, Taylor Simmons, you guys are all kind of coalescing around this. I don't know what's in the water up there, but you guys are all doing great. And I'm loving seeing that.
Thank you. I'm going to hit Dan Go up this summer. He's actually moved across the country. So he's just up in the interior of BC and we have a cottage just a bit past him. So I've told him when I'm headed up to the cottage later this summer, I'm going to hit him up and we're going to do a meetup.
That's awesome. He and I were actually texting just the other day. I told him that you were coming on the show and he was saying that you're not that far away or you guys were going to meet up. So
yeah, pretty close.
Very cool. All right. So this show, The Break, it's all about breaking your career and moments. I love moments that happen that kind of change people's trajectory, change their mindset, their outlook. And so admittedly, I don't have a great plan for this conversation because I feel like we could go in a million different directions, but I'm going to start here and we'll just see how it goes. So I want to start with you around college. So I read somewhere, I think it was on your About page, that it says, for as long as I can remember, I was driven by learning and competition. As a kid, I read nonstop and I competed in almost every sport with the goal of getting better every single day. But you also said that didn't translate to school very well until you got to college, where the topics of psychology and English kind of kicked you into a higher gear. And I want to start there because I'm curious So what was it about those topics that you think really just meshed with you?
The interesting part, I mean, I'll take a step back and say, well,
Sure.
why didn't I do well in school? And I think the biggest issue that I had was I had undiagnosed ADHD. And so my parents didn't want me to get medicated. They knew something was up. I mean, if I have a kid with ADHD, it was pretty easy to recognize the difference between my two sons. And their theory was, let's get them to read a lot of books and let's put them in as many sports as we can conceivably can to burn out the energy. Yeah. And so we'll burn them out and then we'll put them in front of a book. And that's how he'll learn. But what that didn't do was translate well to school, because I think I had above average intelligence, but I didn't know it. And so school was super boring. I can't remember ever really doing any homework, ever putting extra effort in. My parents would let me sleep in after a hockey game. It was that type of growing up. And I just did straight B's my entire elementary and high school career. And every teacher's comments were, Clint could be a good student if only he applied himself. And so then you take a step back. Why did that change in college? The number one reason was when I went to college, I was paying for it. Right? When I'm in high school, I'm there because I have to be. When I get to college, I'm choosing my courses because I want to take them. And I'm paying to be there. And so the way I approached life, I mean, I've had a job since I was probably 12 or 13 years old. And I didn't grow up with much money. Lower middle class. My parents started doing well by the time we got to the end of high school, but for most of our childhood, odd jobs, not making a lot of money. It's not like we never ate, but you didn't buy anything extra. And so money was always tight. And so all of a sudden, if I'm taking money out of my jeans to pay to go to school, there's no effing way that I'm not getting the most out of what I'm paying for. And so my girlfriend, now wife, was the smartest, second smartest person, or highest grade point, second highest grade point average, right? The other person beat her by like one decimal place type thing. And so she was very capable, good studier, good student. My sister had very high grades. So the first thing I did was talk to them and say, hey, how do I study? Like, I've never done this. I've never put effort in. What do I do? And so they gave me some help. They both actually helped teach me that I was intelligent, that because I'd always gotten B's didn't mean I was a B student. Here's how you can be an A student if you apply what we know is in you. And so that was magical. The second part was, because I had read so many books through my life, I loved writing. I loved reading. English made absolute sense to me. I thought I would spend most of my life as a writer and as an author. In the psychology, I have always liked to help people. As a leader on a sports team, as a leader at school, standing up for friends who are being bullied, being there to hold space for someone when they were going through issues in high school. So psychology and English were what I thought I would always do with my life at that stage, until my wife said, why don't you do something that will get you a job? And so I dropped out of college and started pursuing accounting.
That was literally going to be my next question, because that's a hard right turn right there. And so what was it? Because were you married at the time, or was she a girlfriend at the time? Or influential girlfriend?
Influential girlfriend. So we started dating right at the start of grade 12. I fell in love with her a year before that. She didn't date me for that year. So we started dating in 1995. And by the time we got to where we're talking about, I was 1.5 years into college. So this is about 1998. So I dropped out of college altogether and started doing night school and working full time. And so I had money coming in, but I realized somewhere in there that the accounting designation that I was pursuing wasn't the top one. And the top one was where you made the money. But to get that one, you had to have a degree. So I pivoted again and went back to university. And so up until that point, Mike, my college was like the local community college.
Sure.
It was just basically an extension of high school. All the people I hung out with were guys I played on the hockey team with, and I went to high school with. And then I pivoted to doing the accounting school at night. When I did the hard pivot, I went to our version of a state college. And so one of the top two colleges in the province, or in the state, if you will, for the American listeners. And that pivot put me in a better spot, better caliber students, better caliber learning. And it afforded me the opportunity to get hired at KPMG, which was a life-changing event at that stage.
I got to back up because I want to go from. I want to know the thought process. So, you think you're going to be doing English writing? You're going to be a novelist your whole life, and I see that in you now, of course. And our listeners are going to learn a little bit more about that as we go along here. But did she just say accounting's where it's at, or how did you land on accounting?
So somewhere in high school, I think it was the ADHD coming out. Somewhere in grade 11, at the start of grade 11, I was originally in all the academic subjects, electronics 11, electronics 12, everything that would allow me to go down the path to be an engineer, which maybe given brain style, that's probably the direction I should have gone. Somewhere in there, I went to the counselors and I dropped all academic subjects and replaced them with all subjects that would be really easy. Like go back to the kid who was just cruising through high school.
Sure.
So I dropped everything and went with the simple classes. And those tended to be marketing, business management, accounting, keyboarding, like PE super fit. So I had 2 PE classes. One of them was lifting weights. And so I actually took accounting. I took accounting 11. I took accounting 12. I took marketing 11, marketing 12. We were the people that ran the school store. And so I took all the business courses in high school. And so she already knew I'd done that. And so she said, hey, like that's something you were good at. You can get a job. And I don't think she ever thought this. And I don't know if the people in my family thought it. But I think there was an element of, you're the guy who's just cruised his whole life. You've never put the effort in. If you do English and psychology, you need to get a master's at a minimum. You probably need to get a PhD. Are you really the type of guy who will get a PhD? Do I have faith in you as your girlfriend that you're going to go far enough to make this a reality? And I've never questioned her on that, but I think there was an element of that in there. And the other piece that would be there is my wife is Chinese and culturally much more wired to you go to college to get a job or to get a job. So medicine, finance, engineering, what are you doing that's going to lead to a job as soon as you're done? In psychology and English, don't scream, that's what you're going to do. Don't do the arts, do the sciences, and do business. And so that's how she had been wired growing up. So she's looking at me, and there's this cultural thing where she's saying, hey, white guy, like, no to your psychology. You're not going to get a job. You're going to be saying like, hey, do you want fries with that? Not to pick on anyone who's done an arts degree, because I wish I had. But that's going through her head, is the combo of all of that, is her hardwiring from her childhood paired with, hey, I just dated you for a year and everybody would always ask me whether you were at school that day or not, because no one ever saw you. Like, so I don't believe you'll get a PhD. So I think it was the combo of that. So she started counseling pretty hard for me to change it up.
And in your mind, it was like, oh yeah, sure, that sounds good. Or like, what was in your heart at the time?
I think at the time, I wasn't a deep enough thinker. And it's a big regret. It's a big regret, right? Although, and we'll get to this, it's hard to have any life regrets before 33, because 33 is when I had my second boy. And if I change anything before that, I don't have those 2 boys. And I look at it and say, that's the greatest thing I've ever done, ever will do. And sure, I could have had other kids, but they wouldn't be my boys. And I want those 2 guys in the world. And so I wouldn't change it, but and the friendships and the success I've actually had in the finance world's been pretty incredible. But I look at it and say, if I'm counseling any young person today, like I always write about this, know what you want, understand what it takes, do the work day in, day out. The other thing that jumps out at me is the book No More Mr. Nice Guy. And now I know to ask for what I want. I know to have my boundaries and set, this is what Clint wants. This is what the relationship wants. How do those work together? At 21, I didn't know any of that. So she's smarter than me. She's my girlfriend. I know I'm going to marry this woman. She's suggesting it. I'm like, oh yeah, what you're saying makes sense. Okay. Like I'm just being the nice guy and acquiescing to what she's saying to me. Instead of having the internal strength and fortitude and boundaries to say, I hear you. And this is my life plan, not yours. I intend to get a PhD in psychology, write books, and help people. And that's what I'm going to spend my life doing. I wasn't in a position where I knew enough and was strong enough to say that at that point in my life, Mike.
Yeah, but a lot of times those moments are prompts for us to start thinking deeper, right? Like you just said, you weren't a deep enough thinker. And I can imagine you back then going, maybe it wasn't right away, but it was over the course of the next few months. What do I want? Because most people at 21 don't necessarily have that all set and put in a life plan.
I think I started thinking about it again in my mid-30s.
Okay.
Like I let it go because I'm a pretty committed guy. So as soon as I pulled the trigger and switched directions, I was like, this is the direction I'm going in. And I'm going to be the best. This goes back to the competition.
Right.
This is the direction I'm going in. So I'm going to be the best at what I'm doing. I'm going to be the best accountant I can be.
Yeah.
And now that I've made the decision that I'm going that way, I'm going to be the best accountant. And I always bug her because she also went that same route and I got hired at KPMG before her. So that's always a point of contention that I like to bring up. But that was the thing in our city, that was the number one firm. So that's where you wanted to end up. And we both ended up there. And I never really started questioning that decision until probably 3 breaking points later. For me, there's been 3 major breaking points that have really shifted my life. Well, the first one would be, for most of my life, I lived in my head. And then in my early 30s, I was pretty out of shape at a party. And a woman who was a friend, she had just done like a 10K run, did pretty good. And I was congratulating her. And another friend at the time threw out a comment like, oh, you couldn't do that. And I'd always been a runner growing up. And so I remember just from the competitive standpoint, throwing back at him, yeah, I could. And then it somehow turned into a bet. And as the bet approached, the day that I was supposed to do a specific distance and a specific time, it snowed. And he called and let me off the bet. And then he finished the call with the line, besides, the look in your face when you took the bet was enough for me. So two things. One, that's not a good friend. Two, holy shoot, have I let my life go because I've been so focused on being an accountant, moving up in the firm, making money, that I've given up on my health. That was a big breaking point number 1. And I was laying in bed in the next couple of days. I still had Triathlete magazine. Somewhere in the past, I'd done like sprint distance triathlons, and I always did Ironman triathlons in my head, right? I never actually did them. And this is what we talk about is when you think about the goals that you want to achieve, that's the dopamine is enough for some of us. Mm-hmm. And we have to learn, don't live the dream in your head, live it in real life. And so I remember saying to my wife, I'm going to sign up for this. Because at the back of the magazine, there was a half Ironman in Calgary that year. And she's like, yeah, sure, whatever. Because I never completed things that I set my mind to, Mike. And that was the first time where I took Stephen Covey's Begin with the End in mind seriously and said, this is what I want to do. So I know what I want. Mm-hmm. I'm going to understand what it takes to get to that end line. I'm going to work backwards, and I'm going to take the steps to get there. And this is what I write about a lot with Build Your Get Shit Done muscle, because this was the first major get shit done muscle exercise that I did. And so over the course of the next 9 months, I think I lost 25, 30 pounds, towed the line, did a number of sprint distance, triathlons, Olympic distance, and did the half Ironman. A month later, I went up to Penticton in Canada and volunteered at the Ironman distance race. And at the end of the Ironman distance race, signed up to do an Ironman 1 year later. So over the course of that 2 years, I lost 40, 45 pounds, did a half Ironman, did a few half Ironmans in the end, and did an Ironman distance race, and taught myself that through physical activity, that I could achieve anything that I set my mind to within reason. I'm not going to be a NASA astronaut, but I could set my mind to anything I want if I follow that 3-step plan. That was the first major test of it. And then it was, well, how do I do this in my career? How do I do this in relationships? How do I do it financially? I want to be wealthy. How do I become wealthy? Go down the list. What do you want? Put the plan together and do it. So now that's how I live my life. But that was the first major break that said, wait a second, stop living in your effing head. Live in the real world and get epic shit done. And then eventually I realized, well, why don't I help other people do this?
Makes a ton of sense. There's so many times where people who are struggling in their, let's say, multiple parts of their lives, right? They're just not happy. They're not achieving what they want to. It's very often some type of physical mountain that they climb. And when they do that, they make the same connections that you did, right? So my audience is probably tired about hearing about Ironman, because I've done Ironman, and I had a very similar, story to you in terms of, for the first time in my life, it was, I knew exactly what I wanted. Nothing was going to get in my way. And for some reason, breaking down an endurance event like that into tiny, tiny steps and just getting them done and ticking them off makes so much sense to me. I've had a hard time like doing that, in my career life, as but I'm trying, but it makes total sense to just plan the work the plan, fall in love with the process, do the little things that you need to do to get there. But those two things are tied together so often. And I think when you get yourself in shape, it changes your entire mindset. And when you overcome something like that, or do a feat like that you never thought you could really do, it just changes your entire outlook. And you're able to do so much more in whatever area of your life, because your mind just got split in two, and sky's the limit. So it's amazing.
100%. And I wrote down 2 sentences there: plan the work the plan, because that's it. And yeah, it's physical, but so much of what we do on that journey is mental. Yes. And it's plan the work the plan, and plan the work the plan works for anything in your life. People are like, oh, like you blew up on Twitter overnight. No, I've written on Twitter every single day for 1.5 years. Mm-hmm. I wrote 78 threads in a row. Like that's not overnight. Right. That's having a plan and working the plan. Networking, building relationships. Where do we want to go? How are we going to get there? And then doing it, right? For us, that's worked financially in real estate. It's worked in my career to get to a CFO. It's always taking that step back and saying, where do I want to go, Mike? What's next?
Right.
What's the path? Okay, now I've got the path. I've got the route. I'm just going to march steadily on that path, day in, day out, till I get there. And what I like on that one is Jim Collins is one of my favorite business writers. Good to Great, Great by Choice, and Built to Last. And in Great, I believe it's Great by Choice, where he talks about the concept of the 10X companies and doing the 10X march. In the companies that excel, it's every year, year in, year out, where's the 10-year plan? and how are we steadily going to march to get there in 10 years? And what I start to realize about our lives is, oh, wait, if those companies can do that, why can't Mike? Why can't Clint? Why can't I create a 10-year plan and then march incrementally day by day until I get there? And so what you see companies do, what you see businesses do, what you see sports teams do, just break that down and apply it to your own life.
Yep. Completely. I mean, I think part of the problem that people have is, what do I want?
Yes.
I think that's a really tough question for a lot of people. And for me, it's been tough because I've done a bunch of different things. I look at the world and I'm like, there's so much I want to learn. And, I have these talents, but I don't know what's the best use for those talents. And, we start to overthink things sometimes. Your story is one where you're a very focused marcher. So you got into finance and you got into accounting, and you kept, I'm assuming, putting words in your mouth. So please correct me if I'm wrong, but you kept saying, all right, I'm on this path. What's the next rung? What's the next plateau? What's the next peak that I need to aim for? And you made some of your decisions that way, right? And I'm assuming those were money, status, that's the next part on the plan. And then CFO is right there at the top, right? CFO, it doesn't get much better than that. And you're there. And as part of this journey that you're talking about now, you are sort of reevaluating that a little bit as well, right?
Yeah, well, there was 2 breaking points along the way there. So the second breaking point was I got to a certain level. I got to the director level. And then it was, okay, I'm a year or 2, maybe 3 from being a CFO. What do I need to do to get there? And I was in a company where we were 2 different groups were merging, CEOs of each group, heads of finance in each group, who's going to stay, who's going to go. You're going out and getting tested by industrial psychologists. And somewhere in there, I was told, hey, you can keep doing what you're doing, but there's no more path up. You're done. Or you can go move on and grow your career. And so I remember immediately I bet on myself. I said, well, I guess I'm going to move on. What does that look like? And we agreed on a 6-month runway. And Mike, in hindsight, I look back, I was fired. I mean, the way that played out, like, that's what happened there. So, bygones are bygones, but that's how I look at it now. And that was the first time in my life that had happened. So that was as someone who, maybe growing up in high school, I didn't put the effort in, but as soon as I hit college, I was all in, guns blazing, hardest worker in the room, blue collar work ethic, sacrificing family for career. And so to have that happen, like, it crushed my soul. It was the first time I lost confidence in myself in my life. And I remember I went back to the report from the industrial psychologist, and they recommended a number of books. And one of them was Feeling Good, The New Mood Therapy. So the main paths they recommended were cognitive behavioral therapy, Buddhism, mindfulness, emotional intelligence. And so what ended up happening was those were the steps that I needed to get to the next level, not only as a financial leader, but as an individual, as a husband, as a person, as the most evolved self I could be. And so when we take a step back, and I'm talking about this more and more because this is the book I'm going to write, which will be one of the better things I ever do, is you and I, everyone who's listening, we are highly evolved biological computers, right? We've got our skin suit on, and there's a computer in our skull. The 3 key things, and breaking point 1 was habits and operating systems. So that's the last thing you need to work on, but it's the first thing I worked on. The second thing I worked on was the one that should be the first, should be the second one. So it's in the right order, but I flipped 1 and 3, and that is our software. So my conscious thinking was flawed. Like in Buddhism, we call it the monkey mind. And someone just told me a Ram Dass quote that the mind is a wonderful tool and a horrible master. And at that stage in my life, my mind was the master. It's negative thought loops. If you said something to me, I would misattribute the intent behind what you said. And so Feeling Good, the new mood therapy, had the concept of thought auditing. That allowed me to learn to shut off the monkey mind. And when I learned to shut that off and to take charge of my mind, that's when I learned to say, what does Clint want? What direction does Clint want to go? What's the path to get there? How am I going to do that? How am I going to be the best husband? How am I going to be the best leader? So I had good operating habits, good operating system. Now I fixed my software. That was the second break. And within 9 months, I was working for a new company, and I've been there for 9.25 years. I'll be 10 years in November. And within 3 years, I was CFO at that company. So that was a massive game changer on that journey. And that was breaking point 2. I was probably about 34 when that happened. So 32-ish on breaking point 1, 34-ish on breaking point 2, and then breaking point 3. I'll go back to you and then we'll segue to breaking point 3. That was closer to 40, around 38.
You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you. It kind of parallels, I think, I'm pretty sure you've written about this, but I've heard it other places as well, sort of like the hard skills get you the job. The soft skills are what get you, I guess, promoted or to the top echelon. And you kind of were talking a little bit about that within, I would say, hard skills, soft skills. But those soft skills are what amplify your entire life, because you multiply that across not only business, but all of your relationships, your friendships, your spousal relationships, your relationship with kids, all of this type of stuff. So is that
100%.
Correct? Yeah,
100%. You start to read about the emotional intelligence, and two of the most important things you can do, and I write about these two a lot. One of them is self-awareness, and then the other is self-regulation. So self-awareness is the awareness to see, how do other people see me? And my energy patterns were too frantic, too spastic, too high energy, too abrupt. The way I would respond to questions, there was no pause.
Mm-hmm.
And so it implied to the person on the other side, even if you're a fast thinker, what you do is you don't give your answer right away, Mike. You take that pause, take it in.
Yeah.
Give your answer. The answer might not have changed, but now there's an appearance from the other side that you were deliberate, that you put thought in, that you didn't rush the answer. So I talk slower. I talk deeper. I talk from a more centered place in my body. I'm calmer in presentation. The end result is no different. What I'm saying is no different than what I would have said. It's how I say it, how I measure it, and how I respond. Now, where it does change is because I'm slowing myself down, I am listening better. I am more empathetic. I am, okay, I hear what you're saying. And I'm going to listen, not to answer. I'm going to listen just to hear what you're saying, and then understand, seek to understand first, then to respond. And the more you're able to do that, the more people trust you. The more you're willing to say, I don't know, or I effed up, right? You're no longer coming at it from, I have to look the best. You're coming at it from humility, curiosity, seeking to help the person on the other side of you. And that's all the emotional intelligence side. And then when you amplify that with mindfulness, you're meditating, you're doing maybe box breathing to be a calmer human being and to be more centered. The more you can do those things, the more you're generally going to respond to anything that's coming in a more authentic, wholesome way, that the people on the other side want to have that conversation with you. They want to trust you. They want to promote you. They want to back you up. And so that was about 4 to 5 years of concerted effort to improve my emotional intelligence and improve my pace and energy. And so I think I'm a completely different person today than I was when I started that journey.
What did you start with? I assume you got some direct feedback. What was the key? Or I guess maybe if it wasn't what you started with, looking back, what was the bottleneck or the linchpin of changing a lot of those different things?
The main linchpin was the person that I was taking over to be a CFO for. I had a couple of years under him of shadowing him and learning from him and growing with him. And he was very forthcoming in, this is what I see. This is what I recommend. Can we get you from A to B? And one of the things he always would comment on was he found it a bit strange that he would say, you should change this behavior in this way. And I would almost immediately do it. Mm-hmm. And he would say, like, that's not normal. You shouldn't be able to do it. And maybe it's not, but I said to him, well, I want to be CFO. You're telling me this behavior is in the way. So I'm going to get rid of that behavior. And I'm going to adopt the one you're telling me to adopt. Like it just seemed common sense to me. And the way I think about that now, maybe it's not common, maybe not everyone does it, but it's almost acting, Mike. And so what I started doing was I started looking around the table, because now I'm at the leadership table. There's 8, 9, 10 other leaders around that table. And I'm saying, what are Chris's 2 best strengths? What's Jason's 2 best strengths? What do I really admire about Mike? And those traits that you have that I admire, I'm going to make them mine. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to take 2 from you, 2 from you, 2 from you. And slowly every day, I'm going to pick one at a time, and I'm going to copy that behavior until it's my behavior, until it's ingrained. How I hold my hand, right? Like Bill Clinton, Obama, pointing with your thumb. Like, I'm going to make that mine. When I talk, I'm going to use that as my gesture. How deep is my voice? How slow is my pace? What questions am I going to ask you? I'm going to pick the people that I admire the most, and I'm just going to copy those behaviors. So the first was, we did a 360-degree feedback, and it was, hey, here are the things that are holding this guy back, right? Pace is too fast. Not a great listener. Answers too quickly. Comes into a room like, it was almost like describing I came into a room like Kramer from Seinfeld, where you come in and you're and I was like, okay, well, I'll come into the room a little slower. So it was that type of feedback. And I remember just reading that feedback and saying, okay, well, here's the things they say I do well. Here's the things they say I have to do better. Let's just do them better. And who on that leadership team or in my life, because my friends are all pretty high performers, who can I look at and say, this area that they're telling me to work on, the best person I know at that is Andrew. And I'm going to, when I'm in that situation, I'm going to act as Andrew would until that becomes how I act. And once you've got the one behavior, you say, okay, well, that's in the filing cabinet. Now I'm going to go get another behavior, and I'm going to get another one. This is the same way we do it on social media. Who are the accounts that I like? I'm going to keep reading their content, and I'm going to keep, it's like they say with copywriting. I'm going to get the copy of the copy letters, and I'm going to rewrite them by hand until I have that muscle memory of that writing. And now that's my style.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to move that aside because I've already embodied it. And I'm going to grab another writer and I'm going to take their style. And then but I'm not going to take their full style. I'm going to take the pieces that resonate with me until I have my style.
Right.
And you do that with your behaviors. And so that was the journey of picking all those behaviors. And I think somewhere in there, reading books on all of them, like I have behind me, it's a really good series. I don't know if you can see it. It's the Harvard Business Review Emotional Intelligence series. So you could grab a book on mindfulness, a book on focus, a book on self-awareness, a book on self-regulation. And it's all studies with 4 or 5 key actionables. So I was like, oh, okay, well, here's a good list of 4 to 5 actionables that I can act on to improve that one element of emotional intelligence.
Excellent, comprehensive sort of story of how you attack things, and how you systematically, go ahead and get better at something. So that kind of maybe trying to lead into this third break a little bit. And if I don't get all the way there with this teaser, just go there. But you knew what you needed to do to get to CFO. Why did you want to be CFO?
Yeah, and it wasn't even CFO. CFO was a step, right? So, and this is what leads to it all. So 3 or 4 things are happening all at the same time. 1, I want to get to CFO. 2, I want to be an owner. And when you step back, why do I want those? My 3 greatest strengths: learning, ideation, competition. And I don't realize it for a couple of years, but I want that CFO and I want to be an owner because of ego. Because on the path that I'm on, accounting, now I'm in real estate for like 7-8 years. The number 1 spot to be is an owner of a real estate company. So why do I want to be an owner? Because it's ego. That's how you win. You own. You're an owner. Why do I want to grow my net worth? Because I want to have a big number, because that's winning the game. So once you cross a certain threshold, it's all about scorekeeping, right? It's not real anymore. And I'm not nowhere near that yet. It's an eventuality. But that's playing into it. And then what's happening at that same time, Mike, is my relationship with my kids is suffering because I'm not there, because I'm working so hard to become the CFO that I'm not home. Like I'm doing 70, 80-hour work weeks. I'm working 7 days a week. My wife's crying because she misses me. My son stopped saying he loves me. Like it's getting painful. And I'm starting to try to reconcile all of this. And I'm having fights with my wife. I say I give up. She tells me she'll never stop fighting for us. Something triggers in there. So all of this is happening at the same time. And then I get told I won't be a shareholder, right? I can be a CFO, but that's it. And so somewhere in there, I realize, okay, my immediate response when I find out I can't be a shareholder is similar to the response when I was told I couldn't be a CFO. Okay, well, then I have a defined life in this role. I can be here for at most 10 more years. And interestingly, I already knew that if I wasn't an owner, what I would want to do in my life was, in essence, what I wanted to do when I went to college the first time.
Right.
I had already decided that I would write, podcast, public speak, coach and consult, private equity and real estate investing. I already had the list. It was like, okay, well, if they don't make me a shareholder, what will my life look like? These are what I'm going to want to do. And I'll need a certain amount of time to get a certain amount of net worth so that I can make that pivot and be okay. And so I'd already built the plan. So when they told me no, I said, okay, well, you've got this much time, and then I'm going to be doing these things. And then the other key thing that happened was, because I had that fight with my wife and she said, I'm committed to fighting and I'll never give up on us, I knew I had to make a big change. And so I joined a men's group, and somewhere in there, one of the exercises we were doing, I would always laugh. And I said to the leader in the group, hey, like, why am I always laughing when this is supposed to be serious? And he just off the cuff threw at me, well, maybe you don't take yourself seriously enough, and maybe other people don't either. I was like, oh, it was like a kick to the groin. Like I went into work the next day. I was asking like people on my team, like, hey, do you take me seriously? Like I was so shook. And it was a wake up call. And I was like, well, maybe I don't. Like maybe that's why I have imposter syndrome. Maybe that's why I'm not achieving at the level I want. Maybe that's why I'm not taking the steps in life I want. So I read every single book on the recommended reading list. No More Mr. Nice Guy was pretty life-changing. Started doing the work. Within the next 3 months, I went from like being in a group to like leading one of the cohorts. Did that for about a year. And then in there created my plan for what I'd do for the rest of my life. And then that plan is what I'm acting on now. And became a better husband, became a better father, became a better at everything because now I was taking myself seriously. I was taking everything that you and I've been talking about to date and applying it. And then the third leg is our hardware. That's our subconscious wiring. So a lot of what you do in these groups is talk about your childhood, relationship with your dad, relationship with your mom, start to do shadow work. Because most of how we behave is subconscious, as Carl Jung says. Until you make your unconscious conscious, you will forever be led by it and call it fate. And so let's do the deep work to go back to that inner child and understand what is all my hardwiring and how do I replace it with the hardware that I want. So up until that point in life, all the pushing I did, Mike, was to have my dad say he was proud of me. Like you go back to like being 9 years old and you want dad to say, he never says I'm proud of you. Says he loves you, but he never says he's proud of you. No matter what you do, it's like dad never said he was proud. So now I'm going to push myself to near death. I'm going to ignore my own kids, ignore my wife. I'm going to like run ultra. Somewhere in there, I did a 1.5 year run streak and did like a 50-mile run. It's like, I'm just going to keep doing more and more and more. Risk heart attack, risk burnout, just to have him say, I'm proud of you. And then it's like, well, wait, I'm like fucking 42. Like, who gives a shit? Like, doesn't mean I'm not going to keep pushing. But now I don't need to push for an irrational reason. Right. Now I'll push for what I want because I want it, because I've thought about why I wanted it, and I'm not choosing it for an unknown reason. Like people think they want a nice car. Right. They think they want the Rolex because they love Rolex. No, they want those things because it will fill an emotional void that they probably developed in childhood. And they don't even know what the void is that they're trying to fill with the object. And so when you get rid of that, and now you know what's driving your decisions, you've fixed your hardware. So I would do that first. Then you fix your software. Then you fix your OS. So that was the last step. And somewhere in there, I went on a silent retreat for a week. And at the end of the silent retreat, I couldn't stop thinking about this shareholder, owner, other life option. And I got on the plane and I just remember drawing like a little bit of a matrix roadmap between two paths. And when I got back to work, I showed them to one of the women who I'd worked with for about a decade and said, hey, which of these two paths do you think is me? And one of them was the writing, speaking, coaching, consulting. The other was being an owner. And she was like, oh, that one. Like, you've only been pushing for that because of ego. And I was like, oh, yeah, it took that outsider to reinforce what it took me a couple of years of deep introspective work to figure out. She's like, that's always been you. Like, even as a CFO, that's why I was good as a CFO, because I didn't focus on the numbers. I focused on the people on my team. Build a good team, bright, capable people, grow them personally, professionally, and financially so that they stay. And so that you as a group are better than you individually. That's always what I'd focused on. I hadn't focused on, I will be the best with the numbers, right? Yeah. So she saw through the ego. She knew the only reason I wanted to be CFO, the only reason I wanted to be an owner was my ego. And she said, if you kill the ego, like this list right here is what that's all you ever talk about. That's what you want to do. So that was a game changer.
Yeah, it's the discovery of what is truly sort of your most innate intrinsic motivation, right? Like it's cutting through the crap of what's actually external motivation versus intrinsic. Like, the Rolex, the cars, the houses, all of that stuff is because somebody else created some measuring stick.
Yes.
That this is society's version of success. And it seems like you came to the conclusion, all right, I see that. I see you now. I want to go do the shit that's going to light me up in here, because that's going to bring the best version of Clint out into the universe. And that's what people need. And so you came back full circle to this thing that I wanted to start with the college thing, because I knew you came back to that. And, it's so interesting. Like, we got to pay attention to those signals early on. Like, we got to figure out how we pay attention to that, and again, obviously your whole trajectory, that's not a waste. You shouldn't regret any of that, but it's so funny. I think it's so interesting of how you're coming full circle back into that person, that original thought that you had of yourself. It's just really interesting. So, react to that if you have a reaction. That's more of a statement than a question. But then go into what you're actually doing with people now. How are you helping people, and what are you, what are you really doing out in the world? What's the next phase of your life?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, we know, like, that's one of the things you talk about in coaching. You do the heads tails test when people have a big decision to make. They say they don't know. Say, okay, well, lay out the two options, and I'm going to throw a quarter up in the air. And while it's in the air, you've picked one of those options as heads, one of them as tails. While it's in the air, before it hits the ground, tell me which one you want it to be, because they know. Yes. They know where they want to go. Mm-hmm. And so I ignored that voice. You're absolutely right. I ignored that voice for 20, and that's why I say it. Like, by the time I make the pivot, it'll be about 25 years. And I never intended to start on the path of the pivot until I got closer to it, Mike. But then we had COVID.
Right.
All my kids' activities were canceled. I was working from home. Wasn't allowed to see family, wasn't allowed to see friends. So I went from running 100 miles an hour to like 10. And I thought to myself, well, why don't I take up some of this time? Why don't I launch a podcast? Why don't I get on social media to promote it? So what do I have going on? So I launched the podcast, which is now The Growth Guide. And every week we interview one author. So I read their book, and then I have a conversation with them about their book. Some great shows coming. We just had, last week I talked to Bill Perkins from Die With Zero. That was a really fun conversation. And somewhere in there, I got on social media to promote it. And I started taking social media seriously August 2021. And within about 8 months, that started to blow up. And so I would say at this point, what I'm probably known for the most would be my Twitter account, which is I am Clint Murphy. And so every week I write at least 3 threads, 3 to 5, and then usually post almost every single day. And I started a few months ago taking the occasional Sunday off just to recuperate. And my goal with the podcast, my goal with Twitter, and what I do with our newsletter that we launched a month ago, which is also The Growth Guide, is to help people be better, achieve more, become financially free. So when you look at everything we've talked about in this conversation, everything I've focused on is becoming better, is being a high achiever. And why it doesn't hurt that I did the finance thing for 23 years is I can help people become financially free, because somewhere along the way, and where it was breaking point 2 when I made that decision to leave the company and put the bet on myself. We were about to close on a townhouse, and we hadn't sold the one we were in, and my wife was pregnant. So the stress that put on us financially, Mike, was insane. Like, it was such a bad idea. And I said, I will never have my family in financial stress again. So I started pursuing learning and understanding financial independence very deeply, and started to invest very aggressively in real estate. So it's allowed us to achieve a fair amount of wealth in our life. and be on a path to financial independence, and to understand how others can get there. So that's the three things that I talk about and write about. The two that I want to help people with and coach people in life, one of them, I want to help people grow their brand and achieve what we've done on social media. So that's one thing that I like doing. That's more of fun because I've gotten so into it through the Twitter. Now we're on LinkedIn, Instagram. We're starting on YouTube next month. So that's a blast. But the big one is helping people achieve their life. I call it get shit done. But bottom line, you're here. You want to be here. And it's up, it's to the right in any area. I want to help you go from where you are to where you want to be. That's what I've spent my life super focused on doing. I want to help as many people as possible on that journey. So that will be the big thing that I do when I pull the trigger and fully pivot, which is still probably a few years away. As long as I can be a high-performing CFO while building all of this on the side, I'm happy doing it, as long as they're happy with me doing it. At some point, they may say, hey, look, it's getting a little out of hand what you're doing on the side over here. We should talk about that, and maybe we make a transition plan. I could conceivably see that happening because it is growing well beyond the expectations we had, Mike. And so if that happens, then maybe it happens sooner than I anticipated. But that's where I see it going. And what that'll look like, ideal day, wake up, long dog walk, meditate, work out, deep block of writing, content creation, podcasts, and YouTube. Another long walk with my wife and dog, because my wife now works with me. She retired and does this full time with me. And then an afternoon block of coaching, running the businesses. And then I shut it off at a certain time, and it's all family after that. And so that's the destination. So until then, I'm pushing hard, kind of burning the candle at both ends, though it's improving because now my wife's involved. And I'll do that until that can become the daily practice. And then that'll be life. And it'll be really what I envisioned when I was 19.
That's awesome. I got a couple tactical questions in there. So one is like, I think one of the things that prevents people from starting a side hustle while working full time, and this is, I think you're a great person to ask this question to, is this idea of it's just a lot of effing work. I'm doing two jobs basically, right? How do you view that? As you're still CFO, you have a good working relationship with your employer who knows about your side hustle, right? Like people always tell me, well, do I tell them? Do I not tell them? You know, all of these types of things. Like, how do you think about being a high level output employee and having this long time frame on a side hustle? Like you're doing it, you're executing it. What do you have to tell people about that?
You have to choose what's right for you. At the end of the day, I am very thankful for my employment. I'm very thankful for what they've helped me achieve in my life. I mean, I'm in the 1% as an earner, so I can never begrudge where I'm at in that respect. And in the fullness of time, I'm not going to get where I need to go from employment. And most people may not. I still think for 90% or more of people, your day job is what's going to allow you to become wealthy. Maximize your earnings, maximize your potential in your day job. Entrepreneurship, solopreneurship, side hustle, not for everybody. But if you've already maximized your day job, like imagine if I've maximized my day job to the point where, or let's use you, Mike, you maximized your day job to the point where you're never going to earn any more money from your day job. Well, now, and you're the type of person who's consistently learning, growing, developing. If you're never going further in your career, every extra ounce of energy you put into learning is accruing to someone else because you're not going to earn more. And that is a financial ratio that doesn't make sense to me. Like if I'm capped on my level and I'm capped on my earnings, well then if I'm still learning and growing, you should enjoy some of that reward. And so to me, that's what hobbies or side hustles is an outlet that allows you to increase your growth because you're still getting better every single day. And as long as your job is not suffering.
Right.
Like if you are doing your day job, you are doing it at a high level, you are adding value, you are moving the business forward, and you have something that you enjoy, that you love, that you want to pursue, do it. I was definitely anonymous for the first 9 months of social media. And then at some point I flipped it to my name and have had some conversations on that. But I focus heavily on doing my job. I focus on building the right team, having the good structure, and making sure that my work doesn't suffer. And then outside of that, yeah, it's a lot, but it goes back to what we've talked about a few times in this conversation. Plan the work the plan. I know what I want in my life. I know where I want to go. And so I've got two choices. One, I can do the effing work and get there. Or I can say it's too much and not do it. Mm-hmm. And then live with the regret of never doing it.
You're listening to the Break Podcast, powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you. A couple quick things that I would add is so not just if you're tapped out money-wise in your job, but also fulfillment-wise. I have no problem with people using their job as a utility, not loving it, but they don't identify themselves, their full selves with the work, right? They have a life outside. That's all great and cool. I don't think everybody in the world has to achieve, enlightenment, right? But if it's eating at you, and if you are able to look around at your life in totality and saying, my job is actually causing me some suffering, I could be a better human being, getting some type of creative outlet or finding fulfillment in a creative way, even if you don't want to, you can tolerate your job. You don't have to get a new job. You can get some of that fulfillment outside, of that job. I've seen people come alive by doing that. And the other piece I wanted to just add is, for people who think it's a lot of work, it is a lot of work, but you become way more productive when you are doing things that you are just sort of naturally curious about and gravitating towards doing. You are a prolific writer because there's a piece of you that loves writing and loves helping people. So that part of it isn't really a job. I mean, yes, of course, it feels like work sometimes to get it done all the time, but that's a piece of you that's naturally coming out that you're giving an outlet to. And so we talk about that all the time. In my coaching that I do and on our podcast with guests, it's you got to figure out this intersection of things that, we talk about it as advantages, right? What are your energy advantages and your aptitude advantages and your interests and how do you bring all of these things together? Because that's the ultimate productivity hack.
And it's super resonating with everything you're saying. So if you take a step back with it, because for me, I want to optimize life in 5 ways: mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, and financial. And so my job can only fill so many of those.
Right.
The other ones I have to get somewhere else. And then you go to purpose, right? So many people we talked about earlier, they don't know what they want. Not only do they not know what they want on a day-to-day purpose, but they have no idea on the meaning and purpose of their life.
Right.
Well, one of the number one challenges I see with young men today, and I focus on young men, A, because I'm a man, B, because both my boys are, and C, because being in men's group, I spent a lot of time with young men and saw where they were kind of falling down, Mike. And purpose is a big one.
Right.
And when you figure out your purpose, your job might not fill it, but that doesn't mean you can't keep doing that job. And whatever the purpose is, you can use the money you make from the job to go fill the purpose somewhere else. Like maybe you want to build schools in Haiti. Okay.
You're financing your purpose.
You're financing your purpose. So you can make the holistic whole doing something that isn't filling that. So 100% agreed on that. And then the second half of it is just hearing the conversation you and I are having. There's no way that you're not better at your day job because of these side hustles. Yes. The intersection of the improved productivity, the better writing, better public speaking, higher emotional intelligence, all of that comes from the podcast and from being a content creator. That gets brought back into the workplace. Every book you read to have a conversation with an author, or you and me having this conversation today, I'm going to bring seeds of this back into the office tomorrow. And so I'll be a better CFO.
Right.
I'll be a better leader of my team. I think the workplace ought to recognize that. Oh, hey, we're having a company event. We need someone to speak. Hey, you know who would make sense? Mike runs a podcast where he interviews people. Why don't we have Mike come be a speaker at this event? Why don't we have Clint interview the president in a fireside chat?
Right.
Like that to me just makes sense. Look at the people on your team. Understand what their end is. What's their passion they all pursue outside of work, and bring it into work and get the best out of them.
Is this where we're going with this piece of the conversation? Does this dovetail with I saw a tweet of yours about being a hybrid professional. Can you explain that a little bit? And is this what we're talking about, basically?
Yeah. And so that was a conversation with, I believe it was Dr. Sarah Beth Burke, and she writes about, let me pull that out. She writes about this concept of hybridity. And so hybrid professional is recognizing that you're the type of person that isn't one thing.
Right.
And so many of us, they want to put us in a box. Like you're the CFO, so you have to be the analytical guy. You should be the most conservative one at the table. You should be this, this, and this. And one of my number one rules in life is I never want to be in a box.
Right.
Like if you think I should be in a box because of a title, you don't know me, because you're more than that. You're a CFO, you're a writer, you're a podcaster, you're an author, you're a public speaker. You're all of these things. And when you're performing at your best, you're bringing all of those to work. And when you bring them all, that's when you shine.
Yeah.
That's when you perform at your best. And we need more workplaces that let people bring all of themselves to work and not say, well, Mike, you're only this because this is your job title. So don't go outside your box. Don't offer to be the guy who public speaks. Even if that's what you do. Clint, you get in your box. Yeah. We're all going to stay in our box. That's a place where A, you probably don't want to work, and B, it's not going to be a culture that thrives.
Yeah. Can't stand the box either. Burn the box, man. That's just like claustrophobic, just thinking about it. Very cool. I want to get on to some rapid fire questions and try to close this out and let you back to your Sunday, if you don't mind. All right. So you're obviously an avid reader, but is there a recent either author or thought leader or influencer that you've come across that's really caught your attention, that you're paying attention to? Somebody recent.
So a few of the books that I've really liked in the last 6 months would be Brad Stolberg, The Practice of Groundedness. That was very enjoyable at this stage of my life. And I really loved Build Your Second Brain by Tiago Forte.
Yep.
That was a great one. I do enjoy a lot of what he writes about. I already have experience in at this stage of my life, but the way Sahil Bloom approaches his writing is great. As a young man, he's turned 32 a month or two ago. He's putting out great content at this stage of his life. If I was in my 20s, that would be a great guidepost to read. Back when I was there, it would probably have been Shane Parrish. So Shane Parrish, Farnham Street, is someone I've been reading probably for 15 years now, and phenomenal at what he does. And I see Sahil going down that same path that Shane went.
I can remember finding Farnham Street blog like when it started. I don't know what year it was, but it was way back in the day. I've been a follower and a reader of that forever. So good. So good.
Yeah.
He's a Canadian as well, isn't he? He's like in Ottawa or something, I think.
He is. Yeah. So I don't think he was originally, right? Because, he was. Because
I think he is. Yeah.
It was CSIS that he worked for, which is our version of yeah. So he
CIA
worked for the Canadian,
or NSA or whatever.
Right,
yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the combination of the two. Canadian Security Intelligence Services, I believe it is.
Yeah.
Secret Intelligence Services. So he worked for CSIS and he lived outside of Ottawa. And I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, he's fantastic. So a lot of negativity in the world right now, but what's got you excited about the next 12 months?
The best part is I take little part in the negativity. So that's step one, right? is like even Tim Ferriss on his podcast. He's one of my favorite podcasters, and he always talks about how Twitter's a cesspool. And I kind of want to say, I wish I could get a hold of Tim and be like, Tim, you curate your own feed,
right?
Because Twitter to me is the happiest place. It's the most learning, the most growth, the most potential. It's the best of humanity, and that's because we curate our own feed. So if you have a feed that is full of hate and negativity, well, you got to question your curation. So that's step one. What I'm excited about, it almost always comes down to what are you worried about? I'm excited about more people realizing their dreams, realizing that there is a way out, realizing that the path they're on doesn't have to be the path, that there are alternative routes. And I think one of the things that I'd love to see, but it worries me that we could be going the other way, is what I do see is just how much division there is in the world. And whether it's social media, whether it's the news, whether it's politics, it all seems to be driven to us versus them. And I want to be part of the group and part of the people, and I think you are as well, that says, well, wait a second. There is no left, there is no right, there is no red, there is no blue. There's thinking. There's good thinking. There's not good thinking. And we can make some choices that are this direction that you perceive, and some choices you'll perceive are this direction. But there is no fence.
Right.
We're all human. Whether it's in America, it's in Canada, it's in Europe. We're all on the same planet. We all deserve the same things. How do we work together and think in a way and improve our thinking, become better, so that we can all win and we can all grow and we can all be better? I want to be part of that. And I do see a lot of good people contributing to that. And so what I want to see is I've started making an effort, like you and me getting a hold of each other in the DMs, and then we end up on this conversation. And we're recording it. But the number of conversations I've had with people from Twitter in the DMs that became Zoom calls, and then road trips and meeting people from Twitter in real life, that is what I'm looking forward to. I want to keep meeting the people I'm building relationships with on that platform in real life and getting to know them as friends, and then working together over the next decade to make the world a better place where we can eliminate a lot of this division. Like, that's a long answer to that question, but that's what has me the most excited over the next year.
I love that. It starts on it's to use a football analogy, it's all blocking and tackling. It's one conversation after another, and leveraging a platform like Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever to build relationships across borders, across thousands of miles like we are now, to have good conversations and then bring them out and spread them to the world. I love that. So you got the Growth Guide podcast and you talked to a lot of authors. If everybody in our audience went and listened to your podcast, do you have a favorite episode or one that really stands out that somebody should go listen to?
Yeah, that's always hard because you don't want to pick. It's like right. Our kids. We don't want to pick favorites, but a couple that I would throw out. My conversation with Brad Stulberg was really good. I really enjoyed that, and one that a couple that seem to really resonate with the audience. The conversation with Brad Ritter about his book Grit really resonated, and the conversation about his book, You're Too Good to Feel This Bad, Nate Dallas. That one really resonated. Yeah. Like Nate went through sort of similar in life to me, where he was flying too close to the sun for too long, burnt out, body broke down, and went through a very scientific process of like, how do I fix this? And like, it's all common sense. It's like, oh, well, I slept more, drank more water, I ate whole foods, I exercised, like practice some meditation. So it's that classic, here are the 8 habits you adopt to live a better life. But it was like, he went through, he put he took the blood test, the urine test, the aura track, he tracked everything and said, hey, what are the common sense things we can all do to live a better life?
Excellent. We'll go check out all of those. All right. Just a couple more. If you could sum up, what's the biggest lesson you think you've learned along your journey about pursuing success, defining success, living a holistic life, however you want to kind of define that? What's the biggest lesson you think you've learned?
Yeah, for sure. For me, it's I'll boil down 3 simple ones for you. So know what you want, understand what it takes, do the work day in, day out. That's number 1 for me. Then a second one from that is, we are what we think. Our thinking is flawed. Fix your thinking. And then the third one is financial independence. And earn more, spend less, invest the rest. I like 3s. So those are the 3 big ones that'll change your life. This one is to achieve anything you want. This one is to improve your thinking so that you can do this. And then the last one is for people who want financial independence. A lot of them focus too much on, I'll just cut my spending. But you can only cut spending so much. You have to increase your earnings, and then you have to invest. And increasing your earnings ties to the first 2.
Excellent. So you're a prolific writer. You are writing at least one book, I thought I heard. You're writing a novel as well, right?
Yeah, I wrote a novel with my sister.
Oh, you wrote a novel.
So I wrote a fantasy novel. We haven't published yet.
Okay.
And you realize after you write a book that's only half the battle. Then you have to find an agent. Then you have to get published. And so I've had that on hold because I've been so focused on building all of this. And so over the next few months, I have to bring that back online, finding an agent. And then there's 2 ideas I have for books to write for nonfiction. One is a financial independence book, and one is a book which really goes over what we just talked about with earn more, spend less, invest the rest. And then a big part of that, what people don't realize, a big part of money is mindset. So similar to psychology of money. So that's one idea. And then the second one is about deep growth. And that's the 3 breaks that we talked about, being the hardware, software, and OS. So those will come, I think, probably more likely, Mike, as I approach that pivot in retirement.
Yeah.
Is because there's only so many hours in the day, especially as we start to build out the YouTube studio. So those are coming. And the book was a fantasy series that we're writing. Yeah.
Is there so what I was going to ask on that one, is there like a sneak peek or like a little, like, can you give us a little taste of what it's about, or where you?
Yeah, it's actually really fun. Like I love it. And part of what's fun about it is I take everything I learn in life and put it into that world.
Sure.
So there's like elements of socialism versus like, bad capitalism, greed, and like a monetary aspect to it. But it's the magic system is elementalism mixed with a bit of mind magic. And then it's your classic hero's journey, woven over 4 to 5 books. And the hero starts off as a kid, bad dynamic with dad, and then they go their separate ways. And eventually it'll all come back together in the story arc. And those two will go through their epic battle. And there's some plot twists that you learn along the way. So I can't give away too many of those, but I think it's fun. It's pretty epic. It's a combination between epic fantasy and Harry Potter, if you will.
Well, very cool. We are, every single one of us is on our own hero's journey, as I've written before. So that's awesome. And I would love to know, I'm sure following you and following your journey, I will know when that is published, and I'm going to dive in, because anytime we can think about and put ourselves in a situation or a story, and we can identify with that hero and that journey, that just emboldens us, I think, to think about our own situations. And so that's amazing. And I can't wait to read it. Very cool.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I really appreciate you being here. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for spending your Sunday afternoon with us away from your wife and your kids. I really appreciate it. My last question is just tell our audience, please, where they can find you online. And we will make sure we have everything in the show notes and get it all out to them.
Perfect. I would say the 2 spots that I would focus on are, one, the website is thegrowth.guide. And that's that. And then the second one is Twitter. I am Clint Murphy. And I respond to pretty much every DM I get. So except for the creepy, spammy ones. And Mike knows what I'm talking about.
Yep.
And if you start it with just hello and then don't say anything after that, that's an auto delete. So just put a message in there. And if you have a question, don't ask if you can ask a question, just ask us the question. So I respond to everyone, Mike, and love it over there on Twitter. And then the website is definitely where all of our work goes. So you can find everything we do there. And thanks for having me. Like, it was an absolute blast to have a conversation with you. It's my favorite thing to do, to get together and be on both sides, right? Whether it's interviewing on mine or jumping on someone else's and having the conversation. I love this.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Great to meet you. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your Sunday.
Thank you, buddy.